The sound of clippers echoed through the supermarket, and with each cruel laugh, a billionaire's wife lost more than just her hair. The hum of fluorescent lights flickered through the narrow aisles of Budget Mart, mingling with the faint buzz of clippers and cruel laughter. The sound would echo in Aaliyah's memory long after that day, the day three women decided to turn her kindness into entertainment, the day they mistook her humility for weakness, the day they learned what real power looked like. Aaliyah had always been different from the women who orbited her husband's world. While others basked in luxury, she found comfort in the ordinary. She was the kind of woman who clipped coupons even though she could buy the store, who preferred farmers markets to designer boutiques, who smiled at cashiers and helped strangers pick the best apples. To anyone watching, she seemed like a modest housewife. No one would imagine that her husband, Christopher Sterling, owned one of the largest corporate empires in the country. She had grown up on the outskirts of the city, where small dreams fought to survive. Her mother used to say that gratitude was richer than gold, and Aaliyah carried that lesson into adulthood. Even when wealth entered her life, humility stayed. But humility, in a world obsessed with appearances, is often mistaken for frailty, and cruelty has a way of sniffing out the gentle. It started as whispers. Every time Aaliyah visited Budget Mart, three women, Jessica, Monica, and Patricia, would linger nearby, their perfume heavy, their laughter rehearsed. They were symbols of everything she wasn't, loud, lavish, and hungry for attention. Designer heels clicked like weapons as they strutted through aisles, judging, mocking, smirking. At first, Aaliyah ignored them. She had learned long ago that dignity spoke louder than insults. But cruelty feeds on silence, and one afternoon their whispers grew teeth. That day, Aaliyah wore her usual, faded jeans, a simple blouse, hair tied in a loose braid. She was comparing prices on produce when a cold shadow fell over her. Jessica, draped in luxury, sneered as if inspecting something beneath her. Monica and Patricia flanked her, their laughter slicing through the quiet store. What began as petty insults, jokes about her clothes, her simplicity, her life, escalated when Jessica, with a flash of spite, reached into her designer bag and pulled out clippers. The first buzz of the blade startled the air. The women laughed as they surrounded her, pretending it was a prank. But cruelty, once unleashed, has no restraint. The sound of clippers drowned out her trembling breath. Strands of her hair, the hair her husband loved to brush aside tenderly each morning, fell to the cold tile like fragments of stolen dignity. Customers watched, frozen between discomfort and cowardice. Some raised phones, but none raised voices. When it ended, the bullies walked away smirking, leaving Aaliyah collapsed among the fallen strands, shaking with disbelief. Her reflection in the glass freezer door barely looked human. Hollow eyes, uneven scalp, tears streaking her cheeks. For a moment, she wished she could vanish. But kindness has allies in unexpected places. Kevin, a teenage cashier who often helped her carry groceries, had recorded everything. He wasn't powerful, but he was brave enough to act when others didn't. With trembling hands, he called the number she once mentioned belonged to her husband. Within minutes, that single act would shift the balance of everything. Across the city, Christopher Sterling sat at the head of a boardroom table, surrounded by executives negotiating a billion-dollar merger. He was known for his composure, for his precision, the kind of man whose silence could command a room. But when Kevin's voice reached him, describing what had happened to his wife, that calm shattered. The pen fell from his hand. Without a word, he rose, leaving a room full of stunned faces. Within minutes, his convoy of armored SUVs was racing across the city. At Budget Mart, sirens weren't the sound of police yet, but of justice approaching. The store manager blinked nervously as black vehicles pulled up, tires cutting against the pavement. Men in tailored suits stepped out first, bodyguards, lawyers, security. And then came Christopher. His presence filled the parking lot like a storm.
The same man who once closed billion-dollar deals now walked through automatic doors for something far more personal, to reclaim his wife's dignity. Aaliyah stood near the exit, trembling, her head covered with a trembling scarf someone had handed her. The moment Christopher saw her, his heart broke. Without hesitation, he removed his suit jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. No words passed between them, only a look that said everything. Then quietly, but firmly, he turned to the manager and said, "Lock the doors." Panic spread like wildfire. The three women, oblivious until now, froze when they saw the security detail closing in. Christopher's team already had the viral footage. Within minutes, the store speakers fell silent except for the echo of heels against the tiles as the bullies were escorted to the manager's office. The room filled with tension as Christopher entered, calm, deliberate, terrifying in his stillness. The bullies stammered excuses, their arrogance wilting under the weight of realization. Jessica, the self-appointed leader, finally recognized him. Her face drained of color. "Sterling? As in Sterling Global?" she whispered. The truth landed like thunder. Christopher didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he simply handed each of them a folder, thick with documents prepared by his legal team within the hour. Each page outlined lawsuits, contract terminations, and financial consequences meticulously crafted to dismantle their lives the same way they had dismantled his wife's peace. Jessica's husband, a senior employee at one of Sterling's subsidiaries, was already fired. Their country club membership revoked. Their mortgage, once secure, suddenly at risk. Monica's family's restaurant chain, all supplier contracts canceled. Their leases terminated. Her luxury car repossessed by the very bank that Sterling Holdings owned. Patricia, whose uncle managed the store, learned that Sterling had just purchased the entire Budget Mart franchise. Every employee who had stood silently was dismissed. The store itself would be demolished and rebuilt as a community center, named after Aaliyah Sterling. No violence, no yelling, just quiet, calculated justice, delivered with precision sharper than any blade. As the women broke down, begging for mercy, Christopher stood beside his wife, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. And then, for the first time since the attack, Aaliyah spoke. Her voice was soft, but steady, the kind of voice that carried more strength than anger ever could. She told them they had taken her hair, but not her worth, her peace, or her compassion. She reminded them that kindness was free, but cruelty always came with a price. The lawsuits totaled tens of millions. The video, now viral, painted the bullies as the faces of public humiliation. Within weeks, their lives crumbled. Jessica's husband left her, her social circle vanished, and her once perfect mansion stood empty. Monica's business empire collapsed under debts and lost contracts. Patricia and her uncle faced criminal charges for assault and workplace negligence. The once smug trio became living reminders that power abused always implodes. Yet amid all this downfall, Aaliyah found peace. She didn't hide her bald head. She wore it with quiet pride. In interviews, when asked how she felt, she said, "It grew back stronger, just like me." Her words became a rallying cry for others who had endured humiliation, reminding them that dignity can't be stolen, only surrendered. Christopher, too, changed. He began funding programs for victims of public shaming and bullying. The community center, named after Aaliyah, became a sanctuary for kindness, a place where people learned empathy, respect, and resilience. Together, they turned cruelty into a movement for compassion. The world loves power, but it rarely understands it. The bullies believed power came from money, from appearance, from control. But true power, as Aaliyah and Christopher proved, comes from restraint, from using strength not to destroy, but to protect. And though the memory of that buzzing clipper would never fully fade, it transformed from a sound of humiliation into one of awakening. It reminded everyone who watched the story unfold that humility isn't weakness, it's grace under fire. That kindness isn't fragility, It's a force capable of disarming the cruelest hearts. Aaliyah often returned to the rebuilt site months later, standing quietly beneath the sign that read, "The Aaliyah Sterling Center for Hope." Children laughed there, community meals were shared, and the very ground that once echoed with cruelty now pulsed with healing. Her story became legend, not because of wealth or revenge, but because of what it revealed about humanity. That even in a world obsessed with status, there is still room for gentleness. That justice can exist without hatred. That love, when tested, can roar louder than vengeance. In the end, the women who shaved her head hoped to leave her broken. Instead, they left her unbreakable. And that, perhaps, is the truest power of all.